Hey everyone, Kevin here with Jenny, and welcome back to History Rewind. Get ready to dive into a story that spans continents and centuries, a story of ambition, innovation, and a legacy that continues to shape our world today. Buckle up, because we're about to rewind the clock on the Ottoman Empire.
You're right to call it a story, Kevin, because it's so much more than just dates and battles. We're talking about an empire that lasted over 6 centuries. Imagine that, influencing everything from the art and architecture we see today to the geopolitical map of 3 continents.
6 centuries. That's longer than America has even existed. We've got our work cut out for us with these sources. Just skimming through, we're talking about a powerful military force, a surprisingly modern government system for their time, incredible cultural achievements, and a lasting impact that still resonates today. Where do we even begin?
Well, like with all good stories, we start at the beginning, and the Ottoman Empire's origin story. Let's just say it was a bit more humble than their eventual reach. Picture this. It's 1299. A small Turkish principality emerges in Anatolia, led by a fellow named Osman I.
Osman III. That's where we get the name Ottoman, right?
You got it. Now, Osman and his successors were ambitious, to say the least. They weren't content with just a small slice of land. Their expansion was swift. And by the early 1300s, under Orhan I, they captured Bursa, making it their capital and sending a clear message. The Ottomans were a force to be reckoned with.
And I'm guessing capturing Constantinople in 1453 wasn't just some random Tuesday for them either, right? This was a huge turning point.
Massive. We're talking about the heart of the Byzantine Empire, a city that had stood for over 1,000 years. When Mehmed II, known as Mehmed the Conqueror, claimed it for the Ottomans, it sent shockwaves throughout Europe and beyond. It marked the end of an era and the rise of a new power in the East.
Wow, to conquer a city like Constantinople, you'd need more than just brute force. Was it a strategic masterpiece, or did luck play a part?
It was a combination of innovative tactics, military might, and yes, maybe a dash of luck. Mehmed used cannons, which were relatively new technology at the time, to breach the formidable walls of Constantinople. This victory cemented the Ottomans' position as a major player on the world stage and transformed their capital, renamed Istanbul, into this vibrant hub of trade and culture.
From a small principality to conquering Constantinople in just a couple of centuries, talk about a meteoric rise. But it seems like their story is about more than just military might. They had what's considered a golden age too, right? This Suleiman the Magnificent keeps popping up in the sources.
Ah, Suleiman. His reign from 1520 to 1566 is often seen as the pinnacle of the Ottoman Empire. And you're right, it was about so much more than just expanding borders. We're talking groundbreaking legal reforms, stunning architectural achievements, and a flourishing of art and culture that still captivates us today.
Okay, now those are some details I need to hear more about. I know Suleiman pushed into Europe, even reaching as far as Vienna. But what were these groundbreaking legal reforms? The sources mention him being called the lawgiver, which seems like quite a title.
It is, and he earned it. See, instead of just imposing Islamic law, known as Sharia, on everyone within the empire, Suleiman combined it with existing customary laws from the different people they ruled. This might not seem groundbreaking now, but back then it was a surprisingly sophisticated legal system. It helped him maintain stability within this incredibly diverse empire.
So he strategically blended legal systems to keep everyone happy and the empire running smoothly. It's clever. But what about the cultural flourishing under his rule? The sources mention a certain Mimar Sinan. Any relation to those breathtaking mosques you see in Istanbul?
You bet. Mimar Sinan was an architectural genius, and Suleiman was his biggest patron. Think of Sinan as the Frank Lloyd Wright of his time. He designed mosques, bridges, aqueducts, you name it. The Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul is just one example, and trust me, pictures don't do it justice. The way he used light, space, and intricate details was revolutionary and is still hugely influential in architecture today.
It's incredible how, centuries later, we can still feel the impact of this one architect. And it really adds a new dimension to Suleiman too. He wasn't just conquering, he was cultivating a civilization. Speaking of which, this leads us to something I find fascinating. Their approach to governing a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire. This millet system I'm reading about, is it as unique as it sounds?
It's more than unique, Kevin. It was revolutionary for its time, really. Imagine an empire where different religious communities, Greeks, Armenians, Jews, you name it, they're allowed to maintain their own religious laws, their own customs.
Hold on, really? So they weren't forced to convert to Islam or abandon their traditions. That doesn't sound like any empire I learned about in history class. What was the catch?
The catch was loyalty, primarily to the Sultan, and, of course, taxes. But within those bounds, these communities, they had a surprising degree of autonomy. They could run their own courts, their own educational systems. They even collected taxes for the empire.
Wow.
It was a system built on pragmatism as much as tolerance. A stable empire meant keeping the different communities relatively content.
It's like a fascinating early form of multiculturalism, but centuries before its time. It really makes you rethink those simplistic, oppressive empire narratives, doesn't it? But this system of decentralized governance, did it clash at all with the centralized power of the Sultan? Weren't there still those powerful viziers and the janissaries?
You're spot on. It was a real balancing act. Think of the viziers as the sultan's right-hand men, highly influential figures running the daily affairs of the empire. And then you have the janissaries. Now, the janissaries were the sultan's elite military force, renowned for their discipline and their loyalty. But the fascinating thing about them is their origin story. These weren't just soldiers born into the role, they were often recruited as young boys from Christian communities within the empire.
Wait, recruited, you mean like taken from their families?
Yeah.
That's a bit jarring, to say the least.
It's a complicated part of their history. It was known as the Devshirme system, and essentially it was a form of mandatory service where boys, often from the Balkan regions, were brought to the capital. They were converted to Islam, educated, rigorously trained for either military or administrative positions.
Wow. Talk about cultural exchange, but on a whole other level, you've got boys taken from Christian communities, raised as Muslims, serving the Sultan. It's a wild thought they could rise to become some of the most powerful figures in the empire.
Precisely. It was a system designed to create a fiercely loyal and incredibly effective fighting force, completely beholden to the Sultan. Now, of course, the ethics of the Devshirme system are debatable, but there's no denying its impact. The Janissaries played a key role in the empire's expansion, and they were a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield.
It seems like every corner we turn in the Ottoman Empire's story, we uncover something unexpected. But even with innovative governance and a formidable military, no empire lasts forever. Eventually, the cracks start to show.
That's the thing about empires, Kevin. They are so often built on a foundation that contains the seeds of their own decline. For the Ottomans, internal problems like corruption, economic stagnation, those began to take their toll. Plus, you have the 17th century, which sees the rise of new European powers, challenging the Ottomans on multiple fronts.
It's like the saying, the only constant is change. And the world was definitely changing around them. Didn't the Ottomans get caught up in some pretty costly wars around this time?
They did. Conflicts like the Great Turkish War, which lasted for almost 2 decades between 1683 and 1699, those wars drained their resources, weakened their grip on power. But what's interesting is that they didn't just passively accept decline. The Ottomans tried to adapt, to modernize their empire in the face of these new challenges. This is where we see the emergence of what are known as the Tanzimat reforms in the 19th century.
Ah, yes, the Tanzimat reforms. Was this their attempt to play catch-up with those rapidly modernizing European powers?
It was more nuanced than that, Kevin. They weren't simply copying Europe. They were trying to find their own path to modernization. These reforms, they touched on everything from the military and the economy to education, even the legal system. They even drafted a new Ottoman constitution, imagine that. They were trying to create a more modern, centralized state. But it was a time of intense internal debate and struggle.
It sounds like a pivotal moment in their history. It's almost like they were trying to reconcile their long history and traditions with this rapidly changing world. But internal change is never easy, is it? Weren't there factions within the empire that resisted these reforms?
Absolutely. The Ottoman Empire wasn't a monolith. There were groups, like what was known as the Young Turks, who felt these reforms didn't go far enough. They wanted more radical change, advocating for a constitutional government, greater individual liberties.
So at the turn of the 20th century, you have this once mighty empire grappling with internal divisions, economic challenges, and external pressures. It sounds like a recipe for, well, disaster, to be honest.
And history, as we know, is full of such recipes, because just over the horizon lay a conflict that would change the course of history for everyone. The Ottoman Empire included World War I.
So the Ottoman Empire enters the 20th century a different beast than the one that conquered Constantinople centuries earlier.
Yeah.
They're trying to modernize, facing internal dissent, and then World War I explodes onto the scene. What happens next?
Well, you can almost picture it, right? This powder keg of internal and external pressures, and then, boom, someone tosses in the match of a global conflict. The Ottoman Empire chose to side with the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, which, well, in hindsight, it was a gamble that didn't pay off.
It does seem like a risky move looking back. What made them think aligning with the Central Powers was, like, their best bet at the time?
Well, remember those rivals we talked about? The ones putting pressure on the empire? The Ottomans saw an alliance with Germany as a way to counter Russia, which had, its own designs on Ottoman territory. They were hoping to, let's say, exploit the chaos of the war to their advantage. But you have to remember, the empire was already significantly weakened by this point, and World War I, it only exacerbated those existing problems.
Their timing couldn't have been worse. It's like they walked right into the eye of the storm, and the outcome wasn't pretty, was it?
Sadly, no. No, it wasn't. The Ottoman Empire suffered major defeats. The resources were stretched thin. And of course, you have the tragic Armenian genocide, a horrific chapter that unfolded during the war, which further tarnished their image on the world stage. It was a dark period, to say the least.
Yeah. It's a stark reminder that even empires with grand histories and moments of brilliance can falter. So what happens when the dust settles from World War I? Is this the end of the Ottoman Empire as we know it?
It's the beginning of the end, you could say. The war ends in 1918 with the defeat of the Central Powers, and the Ottoman Empire is in ruins. The Treaty of Sèvres in 1920, that delivered the final blow. It essentially carved up what was left of their territory.
It's hard to fathom an empire that once commanded such power and influence, reduced to, well, rubble. A footnote in history.
It's a stark reminder that empires, like all things, they're temporary. But here's the thing. Their story, it doesn't end there. From the ashes of the Ottoman Empire, a new Turkey would emerge, led by a man who would become a legend, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk.
Ah, yes, Ataturk, a pivotal figure in Turkish history. He leads them out of the ashes of the Ottoman Empire and into a new era.
Exactly. In 1922, the Ottoman Sultanate was officially abolished. This marked the definitive end of an empire. And in its place rose the Republic of Turkey, a nation determined to forge its own path under Ataturk's leadership. And those former Ottoman territories, well, they became the foundation for many modern-day nations in the Middle East: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan. The list goes on.
It's incredible how the echoes of this once vast empire still shape the world map today. And it's not just political borders, is it? Their cultural influence echoes through art, architecture, even the food we eat.
Absolutely. It's like a cultural tapestry woven over centuries. Think of the exquisite mosques, the bustling bazaars, even something as simple as like the aroma of Turkish coffee. These are all reminders of the Ottoman legacy.
And it's a legacy that extends beyond the physical, too, right? I mean, their legal and administrative systems, their approach to governance, they really left their mark on the world in so many ways.
Precisely. The Ottomans were a bridge between East and West, a crossroads of cultures and ideas for centuries. They fostered exchange and influenced not only the regions they ruled, but also Europe in profound ways. We often focus on, the rise and fall of empires, but it's crucial to remember what they leave behind, the echoes of their presence that continue to shape our world.
This whole deep dive has been a wild ride.
Mm.
From humble beginnings to a vast empire, groundbreaking legal reforms to architectural marvels, and ultimately a legacy that continues to intrigue and inspire. It makes you think, doesn't it?
It does, and it's a legacy that's impossible to, fully grasp in just one conversation. But that's the beauty of history, isn't it? It sparks curiosity, challenges our assumptions, and reminds us that the world we live in is a product of countless stories woven together over time.
Kind of said it better myself. So, for everyone listening, we'll leave you with this. What aspect of the Ottoman story resonated with you the most? Was it their military prowess, their innovative governance, their cultural contributions, or perhaps just the sheer scale of their impact? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and until next time on History Rewind, keep those brain cells firing.